Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Bommer number 7112-652. This is a spring pivot, surface mount, steel base, adjustable tension, double acting, surface mounted spring pivot is what this is. This is the business end of this Bommer 7112, and the 7112 is an industry standard for a lot of applications where you're going to have custom casework or millwork involved, and you're going to have retail situations, or maybe the food court in a museum where you've got all kinds of doors and casework that are working in conjunction with each other. This sort of hardware by Bommer, the 7112, available in several different finishes, by the way. This is the 652, and before I get back, that means that it's both a steel-based product, okay, and it is satin chrome. Okay, now having said that, this is going to be industry standard. You're going to see this on double-acting doors. You'll see it in a cash wrap area of a retail store where you've got a half door getting back behind the cash register area. Very typical. Okay, I've seen this in countless applications in retail situations. I really never see them in anything residential whatsoever. That I'm yet to see. But retail applications, commercial applications, this is an industry standard. So why is that so? Well, first of all, it is a double acting spring pivot, and this is going to be intended for use in doors that are under constant use, a lot of use. So anything retail, exposure to public. This is for doors that are up to 3 foot wide and no heavier than 75 pounds. However, a 75-pound door is practically a full-size door anyway, so this will handle a substantial amount of weight. It will work with a range of doors from 1 inch to 2.5 inch thick, so it's very versatile in that regard. Okay, it features a surface mount sort of application, which is a reference to the jam bracket here, and then of course to the other bracket for the header, for the top of the door. So your installation is going to look like this. So your standard packaging is going to be your pivot with the jam bracket. Okay, you're going to have your top pivot, which is the 7890, and then you're going to have the jam bracket for the top pivot. You're going to have a package of fasteners, and these are just intended for wood installation. Flathead sheet metal screws. Okay. And then finally a tension rod. Now, and by the way, my typical client who buys this is indeed a woodworking shop or a mill shop, someone who's making casework for applications like that, you know, for national tenants in shopping malls, things of that nature. Now, the rest of this video is going to focus on the installation aspect of this. So if you are looking for a generic overview, a visual representation of the item, okay, this is where the video will probably stop being of use to you. Now, moving on with installation. There is a link below this, there are links below this video to both the template and to the installation instructions. And the installation instructions will be included with the material. Okay, this is the same piece of paper that's below this video called installation instructions. Strangely enough, there is not included in the material the template, which for me, from an installer's perspective, it's absolutely necessary to have that document as well. So I'm not sure why they don't include it. However, if you don't have it, it's here. It's linked here. So what we're going to do is let's go over the template first. First of all, the template shows all of the dimensional properties of all of the item completely. So I'm not going to beleaguer all those points here, you know, with a tape measure, because it's all available there for you. Now I've installed these, I've mortised for these, okay, I've set these, so if you have any questions on installation in terms of routing a wood door for it, feel free to reach out. I'd be more than happy to discuss that with you at length. Okay. Now, the top pivot is all drawn out in terms of its dimensional property, as is the 7890. They call it a 7890-3, which is your top pivot plate. Okay. From this template, other than giving you all of the dimensional properties, the information that's really important to know that you can't basically just measure off of this is the reference to the radius at the edge of the door, and then also the clearance that they're asking for between the opposite side, or the lock side of the door, which would probably not be a lock, but the opposite side of the hinge, and the distance between the edge of that door and the jamb. Okay, so, and that's all in the upper third of that piece of paper. The note says a 1 5/16 maximum radius edge of the door for clearance. So what they're saying is that the radius on the edge of the door cannot be greater than 1 5/16. Okay, anything greater than that will not give you an aggressive enough radius on the edge of the door. So that's like the bowl nose on the top row of tile in the bathroom, except that a radius is a double bowl nose. It's required for you to have that sort of condition, because if my fist is the end of a square, is the square edge of a door, you can get the concept that it won't clear unless you've rounded those corners over. Okay, so a lot of people will simply use their router, and they will use a round over bit, and they'll take that edge off the edge of the door, and that works to the point where your radius cannot be greater than, something of that size. So if you had a 1 inch, whatever size you're going to end up using in a round over bit, so long as your radius does not exceed 1 5/16. You can see from the drawing that they don't show it as a smooth radius, and that's by design. They're obviously taking a much smaller bit and not giving you a true radius along the entire edge of the door, because it's not required per the geometry of the hardware. So when I've radius doors, I would always make a very nice, practically true radius on the edge of the door, almost. A little bit, tighter than that. Get my door laid down on my workspace, take my router, and because I would be working with a, much larger sort of round over bit, a customized base in my router, 2.5 horsepower, get that put down on the edge of the door and run that down the style of the door, being careful not to tip it whatsoever, and being careful not to push back against the bottom side of the door as you exit. Just want to make a clear exit off the door. Make one more pass just to make sure that you're clear and clean, but no more. Flip the door over, do the same to the other side. And that's how that works. If you have questions on that, feel free. I'd be happy to discuss that with you. You can also do that on the opposite side of the door as well, because what they're saying, the other note of importance on the template, is that your 3/16 minimum clearance is required there. If you were to round the door over, you'd for sure be able to count on that being 1/8 and maybe 3/32. So you'd be able to make that margin much tighter. Okay, and if the door construction that you have will tolerate that radiusing, by all means do it. It looks nice. However, your door construction may not tolerate it, and you might be aware of the fact that especially if you have a veneered door, you've got that veneer and then you've got the core that it's glued down to. As you round that over, you're going to make greater or accentuate the different layers in that what is technically plywood that make up a door. So keep that in mind. You're going to accentuate all of that. So if you had an 1 3/4 cherry veneer door, and let's say it's a 5-ply door, as you round that over, you will certainly see the contrast between the veneer, which is maybe 30 thousandths, and then the thicker crossbanding that it's attached to. So keep that in mind. You might need to come back and edge tape all of that material, or it's custom and you're doing a no black line, sort of material over the entire face, whatever the condition is. So the template is important because it shows that you need to radius the pivot side and then to leave that clearance, or you can radius it if possible. It also gives the dimensions to the preparation that you need for the boss that's in the bottom of the door. And the boss is this feature here, which we're going to get to in a moment. And that is shown in the lower right-hand corner as a 1-inch diameter hole. But looking at the rest of the detail, I don't believe that there's going to be anything else here that we need to discuss that's inherently important in the installation process. So the rest of that data is there for you to refer to. Now, hopping over to the installation instructions. Let's start at the beginning. Notes. Caution, do not remove the tension pin from adjustable type pivots prior to installation. The tension pin is tucked down here. Do not remove it. Do not touch it. Just leave it alone. You're just going to want to leave that alone. Okay? As I change the tension, you can see how it will come out a little bit, but we'll talk more about that in a moment. You're going to want to set that. It comes set from the factory, preset from the factory. If the tension pin is removed, this could cause failure of the pivot to close the door in one or both directions, meaning it will fail. It will work in one direction and not work in the other whatsoever. And then you'll need to contact Bommer and have them help you go through the process by which to reset that. And every time that someone's done that, they've said, I can't do it, just charge me to send it back so I can get this repaired. We don't want to do that, just leave it alone. Step 1, installation of the jam bracket. Locate top jam bracket at correct height and secure to the jam. Well, that's easy. That's this guy right here. Okay, that's your jam bracket. You're going to want to get that secured. This orientation will go towards the top. Step 2 is going to be your door preparation. Prepare the radius on the door edge. Mortise top pivot socket into top edge of door. That is a reference to the 7890-3. Going back to the template, you can see that you can see from the template what the dimensional properties are of this item, and you can see that it has a 7/8 diameter. Okay, that makes sense. 7/16 radius. When I've done this kind of work, I would go with a 7/8 Forstner bit and zip, zip, zip per those center lines. Nice, clean preparation. Okay, easy sort of situation. I don't like using chisels. You don't have control over how well, or as good of control, I believe, how well the net finished result is. So, routers and other ways to do it. So, step 2, mortise top pivot socket into the top edge of the door. That's done. For mortise type pivot cutout bottom of the door. So that the 7112 is not a mortise type. So we're going to avoid that at this point. Drill the hole in the bottom of the door for the projecting boss on the top of the pivot. So that was that 1-inch diameter. Then back to the template, unless you're going to measure off of this. What dimension do you put it in? Well, from the edge of the door to the center of the boss is 1.25 inches. So that's crucial to know that. Okay. Step 3, installation of bottom jam bracket. So this will come from the factory already attached or installed. This will likely be able to be removed by hand. If not, use a crescent wrench and remove it. You won't require very much. You're going to remove the nut and the washer, and do be careful not to lose either. You will then carefully pull this up and out. Okay, that spline is on there. We're going to put that down. Here's your bottom bracket. Attach bottom jam bracket to pivot on door. Attach nut on hand tight. So what they're saying is attach the bottom jam bracket to the pivot on the door. As it comes from the factory, you're going to be all set. You're going to attach your bottom jam bracket to the pivot, and you're going to put it on hand tight. Crucial. Do not put a wrench on this at this time. Just hand tight. Just secure so it doesn't move. There's going to be a very important reason for that in a moment. Okay, now. Okay, so attach bottom jam bracket to the pivot on door. Attach nut and hand tight. Do not over tighten. Don't tighten at all. Locate and mark correct position on the jamb for the jamb bracket by placing the door in the opening with the top pivot pin in the socket or the boss preparation that you did in the bottom of the door. And you want to make sure that the top of the door, with this installed, is all the way touching the top jamb bracket. And there's a reason for that, which will be obvious in a moment. Held tightly up against. So at this point, you've got the bottom pivot attached to the door, you've got it in the opening, and you've got it pushed all the way up, and you've marked the jamb bracket. Remove the door from the opening, remove the jamb bracket from the pivot, and then attach the jamb bracket to the jamb. Okay. So, installation of the door. Remove the top pivot pin from the jamb bracket using a screwdriver. Carefully use a large slotted screwdriver like a number 3 and carefully remove that. The whole pivot will thread out. Place the door in the opening, inserting the spindle in the bottom bracket. So, what they're saying is, at this point, you've removed the top pin. You have the pivot, affectionately known as the business end of the pivot, removed, and this is attached. Okay, this is attached to the door. Place the entire thing in the opening. Don't just place it inside of there at this point. Now, with the door, and now you've got it in the opening, but you're careful because you're missing the top pin here. With the door in the closed position, place the washer and the nut on the spindle and tighten securely before we do that. So, here's the key. The reason that you held it up tight is because these splines, this conical shape to the shaft in the splines, when it just rests in the bottom, the splines don't bite in to the steel. You held it up tight because what's going to happen is, when you get this attached to the bottom of the door, you attach the washer and nut and you tighten it, those spines are going to bite into the bottom bracket, giving you the proper orientation of the door so that it's fixed, plus giving you the proper margin at the top as well. So, step 4, halfway down, with door in the closed position, place the washer and nut on the spindle and tighten securely. This will draw the spline on the spindle firmly into the bottom jamb bracket. Failure to tighten the nut securely will allow the spindle to turn in the bracket, resulting in a failure of the pivot to close the door properly. So you'll end up ruining the hole here with those splines turning inside of there. So you want to tighten that. We skipped over the replacement of the top pivot, so you're going to want to get that in there. Get that pivot down into there, okay? Tighten that, and then tighten the bottom nut. Step 5, final situation, tension adjustment. For adjustable type pivots only, which of course the 7112 is, to change the closing power, insert the tension rod into the tension collar and turn it clockwise as you're viewing it from the bottom. Okay? So if I'm going to flip it over, I can insert my tension and turn it counterclockwise. Okay? That works just fine for me. Now, obviously, if I'm on the bottom of the opening, I'm going to be looking up at it like this. Turn it counterclockwise. That's the key. You can remove the tension pin. Don't lose it. Do not remove the tension rod. That would be dangerous. There's tension on the tension rod. So you want to hold that in place. Change which hole you want to reinsert the tension pin back into. Test your operation. Reinsert the tension pin and the tension collar at the hole location required to obtain the desired amount of tension. At that point, your installation is done. Following those steps, digesting the installation instructions, doing reality checks on the hardware as you're going through it, possibly going through this video as well, will allow you the first time really to say, okay, I got it, this is not a big deal. Everyone after that will become almost automatic. Okay, it becomes very easy to install at that point. It's great quality hardware, Bommer material, and that's just the bottom line. Interestingly enough, this piece of hardware has their logo, but not the trademark Made in USA. And I can tell you with complete confidence that this is not only manufactured in the United States, but the raw components are domestically sourced. And the only reason well, not the only reason, but the reason that I stated in this video is that that's a fact that Bommer is quite proud of, as am I to represent them. If you have any questions on the Bommer number 7112-652, double-acting adjustable surface mount pivot, and it weighs 3.5 pounds, by the way, or any other Bommer product, please feel free to reach out to us.